So one of the most frequently asked questions that my clients have is, why is it that I have to work so hard to get things done? Why is it that I have to work so hard to get the results that I'm trying to achieve? So today we're going to unpack that question together. And we're going to tie it in, as Glenda mentioned to you. This is part two. This presentation is part two of a three-part series. Because we felt that in order to prepare properly for 2020, which is really what we're trying to do, is to have you see the broad scope of all of that. So how many of you were not at our meeting last month? How many were not at that meeting last month? So I'm going to be talking about something that some of the other people who were here, Dale Furtwängler did a presentation, and he gave a presentation on the importance of choosing a direction before we do anything. When you start thinking about 2020, what's our direction that we want to do? Dale asked some great questions about techniques for getting ready for 2020. So if you weren't here, you didn't miss out, because you can still go to our E4E website, or you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see that the presentation that Dale did. Okay, so you don't have the benefit of that today, but you can still catch up. Getting things done is really a function of the direction, as Dale pointed out to us, how we execute on that direction, and ultimately those two things lead to the results that we get. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, it can't be that simple. But it really is, at the 30,000 foot level, it's a function of that. And it's the actions that we take, or the actions that we don't take, that are going to ultimately lead us to the results that we're seeking. Purpose of my presentation today is to talk about execution and actions as it relates to getting things done. So I don't know about you, but I can identify with this. Most of us has a results gap between where we are and where we would like to be. What happens is we have an idea in our mind about what we would like to do. We say what we would like to do, but our actions don't necessarily tie into the mental picture that we have in our mind about what we want to do. That leads to a gap between the results that we'd like to have and the results that we're actually achieving. So for those of you who are familiar with Sam Carpenter and his book, Work the System, Sam said that processes and systems get to the root cause of that gap. Processes and systems get to the root cause of that gap. What we have to do is to learn to go one layer deeper and to get beyond the obvious of things that's appealing to us. There are several processes that we can work that can help us do that. My favorite process, and the process that I recommend to my clients, is simply plan, organize, prioritize, complete, and modify. Plan, organize, prioritize, complete, and modify. The modify is probably the most important word on here. So this diagram describes this. I'll be using this diagram later on, and I'll drill down deeper into it later. But it's about the plan, it's about planning, organizing, prioritizing. Where we tend to get in trouble is we start over rather than building on what we've already accomplished, right? So that's the modifying part. So we got this far and it didn't maybe work out the way we thought it was going to work out, so we tend to start over. What we really need to do is to modify and build on what we've already done. And then therefore what you do is you continue to repeat that cycle, planning, organizing, and prioritizing. And like I said, I'll give you an example of that a little later on. Seems pretty simple, but why is it that we tend to struggle, right? Most of us tend to not be able to get the results that we're seeking, and we struggle. So why is that? So when it comes to achieving results and getting things done, where does the stress come from that we feel when we're in this situation and not getting the results we want? Where does that stress come from? I'm sorry?
Inside us.
Inside of us, okay. So we have that feeling that's inside of us that says, oh, I'm not getting the things done that I want to get done. Dr. Dan?
Lack of time resources.
I don't have the resources to be able to get done what I need to get done. Caesar? So we have unrealistic expectations for what we're going to do. Alan? Yeah, we tend to put off stuff, right? Yeah, we're going to get around to it. Gail?
I think it's sometimes time beating yourself up, so you're sitting in fear and all of a sudden you just get frozen, and so it just takes all your time away.
Yeah, it just drains our energy from us when that happens. Interestingly enough, David Allen, from his book Getting Things Done, says that the real stress comes from not finishing what we start. This was an aha for me. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking I got too much to do, I got all this stuff going on and all that. But really what the real stress comes from is we do all of these things, but we don't finish them. Because we don't get the reward that we're seeking when we finish things. And I thought that was an interesting observation I wanted to share with you. So Carpenter further observed that 90% of business owners struggle. They don't set direction, they don't get organized, they spend too much time on random trivialities, they thrash around on the surface, and make the uncomplicated complicated. Now, I'm sure none of you can identify with any of that, right? It's like, oh, he's not talking to me. But I know because I deal with this every day. So Carpenter went on to say that only 6% of entrepreneurs are hardwired to think about things in a systematic way. Only 6% are hardwired to think about things in a systematic way. So you see, on the one hand, what's the best way to get results is to think about things in a systematic and process-oriented way, but yet we're not hardwired to think that way. You see, that's a pretty big challenge for us to deal with. So in a recent book that I ran into called Attention Management, the author is Maura Novell Thomas. She says that on top of these things that I just described to you, we are also struggling with what she calls attention management, because the whole world is trying to get us to do things that we haven't thought about or planned for, right? The internet, do this, do that, do this, do that. So you've got all this, in addition to the hard wiring, we've got all of this stuff coming at us, which causes us to go off into all of these different directions. So what does it look like? So this is what it looks like in our business. So the picture represents the activities that we've got going on. The funnel represents our business. So what do? We pour all this stuff into our business. A little bit trickles down through. Most of it slops over and creates a mess. So a lot of what we're doing, a lot of the activities that we're engaged in aren't necessarily getting us results, but they are in fact kind of creating a mess, and it ends up looking like this. Now, I know none of you can identify with this, right? But we as entrepreneurs spend a lot of time fighting fires, a lot of time with do-overs, right? And that is such an energy drain on us. So no doubt that there's a reason why we struggle with what we're trying to get done. So let's not get caught up in what's wrong. Let's figure out what we can do about it. So Carpenter went on to say, why don't we think about moving from being busy, which is what we tend to be very often, to being productive? So how can we move from being busy to being productive? My recommendation is that we marry effectiveness and efficiency together. So if we take the effectiveness that process brings, and we take the efficiency that systems bring, and marry those two things together, that's the best way for us to get the results that we're seeking for. Marrying the effectiveness with the efficiency, marrying processes with systems. We have to overcome the roadblocks that are involved, though, because we do tend to work in random. We tend to work in a reactionary way. One of the favorite things that I learned not too long ago was to think about divergent thinking. I didn't even know what the term meant. But divergent thinking is what Dale asked us to do, which is take a step back and to get clarity of direction. That was really what Dale was encouraging us to do. So we step back in a divergent way, and then when we converge, and we use convergent actions, that's how we organize and prioritize. It's the combination of those two things, though, that are going to get us where we want to go. So one of the things that I'm constantly saying to my clients is, what does good look like? What does good look like? Because they love to just jump in and get to work, right? And then, a week later, 2 weeks later, they're like, gee, I don't know why this isn't working out. They didn't think about what good looks like. So if we start with the end in mind, that will take a lot of those mistakes out of the action. So the other thing is that 20% of our effort will get us 80% of our results. I know you can't identify with all these spinning plates, but most of us end up with our business acting like we have all of these spinning plates going on. Pareto said that 20% of our effort gets us 80% of our results. So the key is that we need to figure out what are those 20% so that we can get the 80% of the results. I constantly tell my clients, stop trying to catch up. Not possible. It's coming at you too fast. You have to prioritize. So we need to move from urgent to important and do first things first. So to summarize then, results are the key what we're trying to get. What did I say at the beginning of the presentation about results? What are the two components to results? Right? Direction and execution. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about 2020. Do I have a clear direction? Ask yourself that question. And do I have a plan to execute that direction? Right? Rather than, oh, I'm going to do this, take a step back and think about that. So my actions, one of the things I wanted to share with you is a tool that I have found incredibly successful, and it's how to organize and prioritize. This is a simple Excel worksheet that says, answer these 4 questions. What are the actions to be taking? Who's responsible? What's the time frame, and how will I measure? So as you're thinking about how am I going to bring all of these things that I've got going on, all these activities, if you'll put them in an Excel spreadsheet like this, you'll find that it's a remarkable tool for managing what you're trying to get done. And it would be inappropriate for me to say that all of these great actions are perfect, but if you don't have the relationships that you need to build on a solid foundation, then it's really not going to work. Relationships with other people, how you feel about yourself, all of those things are things that you have to build on in order to achieve the results that you want to get. So I want to quickly give you the importance. When I started Simply Successful, I took all this corporate background. I knew all this about systems and processes and all of that, and I wasted 2 years trying to figure out what to do. It took me 2 years to figure out what was going on. Because what I was doing is I was running around, doing all the networking, just like all the books said you're supposed to do, and I wasted 2 years. Finally, it dawned on me, I'm going to go back to my roots, which is education. So I started going to places that did education. And when that happened, I want to tell you about a quick story. So the planning part was I decided that I would only go to networking events that had education in them. I went to one in Carol Moreland, sat beside me. She had a customer, a client of hers by the name of Larry from Iowa, who wanted his son to get sales help. So I was successful at getting that business, and for a year I helped their son. This is where the process works though. So after a year, the stepmother, Peggy, got into being responsible for running the company. Larry stepped back, so then she hired me to then move on and do that work. So then after that happened, 3 years later, when she was ready to step back, Nathan, who was the person that I was coaching originally 5 years ago, was part of that. So you can see how I didn't start over. I just kept building and building and building on that process every step of the way. I didn't do anything any different. I accomplished this, I did this, and I did that. That's the process in its simplest form. And frankly, it's how E4E was born. When I saw the power of what happened for me, I just decided, this form of education, what a great place for us to do what we want to do. So why don't we move from firefighting to fireproof, right? This is something that we have the power to do, but it's probably going to change in thinking from the way you approach. So if you will just take a step back, think about things in a different way, take advantage of some of the things that you're learning, you can have an even more productive 2020. So thank you so much for everything, and I just wanted to invite you to Mary Kuthais, who will be doing the third leg of this presentation in December, and she will bring this whole thing to closure. So thanks so much.